So what really makes an act a crime? It sounds pretty simple, right? But what if an act doesn't directly harm anyone else? In this explainer, we are diving headfirst into the really controversial world of vice crimes. These are the acts that live in that murky, gray area between your own personal choice and what's considered public harm.
And that question right there, that's the central puzzle we're going to tackle. What if a crime has no victim? I mean, how can something possibly be illegal if there isn't a specific person who got hurt? That's the core paradox we are going to unpack together.
Okay, so to even begin to answer that, we first have to get on the same page. We need to understand the language the law uses. Getting these definitions right is absolutely the crucial first step. So let's define our terms. What are we actually talking about here? Well, it all starts with this really broad category called a public order crime. Now, this is any act that goes against a society's shared values and morals. The key thing to grasp here, and it's a big shift in thinking, is that there's no specific identifiable victim like you'd have in a robbery or an assault. In a way, the victim is considered to be, well, society itself.
And nestled inside that big category, we find our main focus, the vice crime. This is a specific kind of public order crime, one that's tied directly to behavior someone, somewhere, decided was immoral or corrupting. Now, you've probably heard the term victimless crimes thrown around, but as we're about to find out, whether they're truly victimless, well, that's the whole debate, isn't it?
All right, so we've got the definitions down, but what does this actually look like in the real world? Let's make this stuff tangible. We're going to look at 4 common examples that pop up in the legal system all the time. It is time to open up the case files.
Okay, let's just run through these. First, you have prostitution. The core activity is exchanging sex for money. But the societal concern? That's about public health, exploitation, and this idea of moral decay. Then there's gambling. The activity is just wagering money, right? But the fear is addiction and its ties to organized crime. Drug violations? Obviously, the big concerns there are public health and the violence that often comes with the drug trade. And hey, even public intoxication is framed as a risk to public safety. See the pattern here? In every single case, a personal behavior gets linked to a much wider public harm.
So this all leads us to the next logical question. Why? Why on earth does the law get involved in what seems like really personal choices? What's the actual motive behind making these behaviors illegal in the first place? Well, there's a specific logic that governments tend to use, almost like a 3-step playbook for justifying these laws. Step 1. An act is seen as harmful to the society's shared moral values. Step 2, that moral harm is then connected to a bigger threat, a threat to public welfare or safety. And finally, step 3, laws are created specifically to shield those societal values, acting as a kind of protective wall for the community's moral fabric. And honestly, this quote just sums up that whole philosophy perfectly. The law aims to protect not just individuals, but societal values themselves. That is the core justification, right there. The argument isn't about one person hurting another. It's about an act that could potentially harm the entire moral foundation of a society. But as you've probably already guessed, not everyone is on board with that argument. And this brings us right to the heart of the whole controversy, the great debate. It's really a fundamental clash between 2 incredibly powerful competing ideas, public order versus personal liberty. So on one side of the scale, you have people who say these laws are absolutely essential. They argue they uphold public order, they protect our shared morals, and they can stop smaller issues from spiraling into much more dangerous crimes. But on the other side, the opponents have some serious objections. They argue these laws trample all over personal freedom and an individual's right to choose. They say, look, it's just not the government's job to legislate morality. And they seriously question that whole victimless idea, pointing out that the laws themselves can create new victims through things like unsafe black markets and social stigma.
And all of this leaves us right back at the central question, one that societies have been wrestling with for centuries and are still debating today. There are no easy answers here, but just understanding the arguments on both sides, that's the first step. So the question is still out there for all of us. Where should the line be drawn between public safety and private freedom?